The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Felicia stepped into the hallway, her hands gripping a heavy moving box. It felt like everything she'd been through, her escape, her pain, her past, was crammed into that one box. Her heart was racing, her thoughts all over the place. This wasn't just about moving into a new apartment. It was about running, hiding, and trying to breathe again after everything that had happened. She was supposed to feel safe here, but nothing about this place felt safe. This towering building, with its polished marble floors and glass walls that stretched all the way up, screamed wealth. The kind of wealth that made Felicia feel out of place, like she was pretending to belong somewhere she didn't. Her sweater was too casual for the luxury around her. Her jeans too worn. Even her gold hoop earrings, something she had always worn for comfort, felt like they were too loud in this quiet, pristine place. But she had no choice. This was her fresh start, the only place she could hide. The elevator doors had just closed behind her, and she could feel the weight of every moment, every choice, bearing down on her. 3 days ago, she had caught her ex, Darnell, going through her things, her emails, her bank statements. He wasn't just looking for something. He was controlling her. It was his way of reminding her that she was never truly free, that he could always find her, no matter how far she ran. No more, she thought, gripping the box tighter, feeling its weight more than just in her hands. This was it. Her new apartment. Apartment 34B. Her sanctuary, or so she hoped. She didn't know why she thought that this place would be different, that it would be her escape. Maybe it was just the idea of it, the chance to feel like a person again. But then, as she made her way toward the door, she saw him. Standing just outside the apartment next door, a man, tall, composed, and impossibly calm. His dark eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, Felicia felt like she couldn't breathe. She didn't know why. There was nothing overtly threatening about him. But his presence, it was magnetic. He stood perfectly still, his posture saying everything: confidence, authority, and something else. Something that made Felicia's stomach tighten. He didn't smile, didn't speak much at first. But his words, when they came, were simple, yet they hit her with a force she wasn't expecting. "New neighbor?" he asked, his voice soft but firm, the accent just barely noticeable. Felicia's mouth felt dry as she nodded. "Just moved in." He tilted his head, his eyes scanning her for a moment longer than necessary. The silence between them stretched, thick and uncomfortable. He didn't say anything else. Just stood there, as if studying her. And it made her feel exposed, like he was seeing right through her. "Welcome to the building," he said, the words almost too casual. And then, without another word, he stepped inside his apartment and closed the door behind him, leaving Felicia standing there, frozen in place. She swallowed hard, her hands still trembling as she fumbled for her keys. That man, he wasn't just some neighbor. There was something unsettling about him. Something dangerous. And for reasons she couldn't explain, Felicia couldn't shake the feeling that her life just got a lot more complicated. Felicia finally managed to unlock her door, stumbling inside and shutting it behind her. But as she leaned against the door, trying to catch her breath, the thought wouldn't leave her. That man, Kong man, who was he really? What did he want from her? She'd come here to escape. But now she wasn't so sure if she was running from her past or walking straight into something much darker. She turned the lock, but something about the way he looked at her kept playing in her mind. Was this just a random encounter? Or had she just moved into the lion's den? The questions buzzed in her mind as the silence of the apartment wrapped around her. But before she could think much further, there was a knock at the door. Felicia froze. Who could it be? Stay tuned. You won't believe what happens next. Felicia had been through it all: years of manipulation, control, and fear. But what had broken her wasn't just Darnell's angry outbursts, it was the slow suffocation of her spirit. She could remember the first time she realized she was trapped in the relationship, too far gone to get out, too scared to leave. The man she had loved, thought she loved, was not who he appeared to be. It started small. His constant questioning about where she was, what she was doing. At first, she brushed it off. She thought it was just him being protective, maybe a little clingy, but nothing too concerning. But when it started happening every day, it grew from annoyance to something more sinister. It wasn't until one evening, when she had come home early from a client meeting, that everything changed. Felicia had expected an empty apartment. But when she opened the door, her heart stopped. There he was, Darnell. Sitting at her desk, hunched over her laptop, his eyes scanning her emails with a look of utter detachment. He wasn't just looking for something. He was invading her privacy, crossing lines that could never be uncrossed. "What the hell are you doing?" she had demanded, her voice shaky with a mixture of anger and fear. Darnell didn't flinch. He didn't even seem startled. Instead, he slowly turned toward her, a smug smile creeping across his face. "You think you can leave me, baby?" he had said, his voice cold. "I will always find you. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, you belong to me." The way he said it was so final, so possessive, that it felt like he had tied an invisible chain around her, shackling her to him. That moment, when she saw the control in his eyes, when she realized he wasn't just angry, but calculated, was when she knew she had to leave. She had prepared for this. For months, she had secretly stashed away money into a savings account he didn't know about, setting aside every penny she could. She had researched apartments with top-tier security systems, ones that would make it nearly impossible for him to find her. She bought burner phones, hidden in the back of her gym bag, just in case she ever needed to reach out for help. And when she wasn't looking up apartment listings or planning her escape, she was reading articles about how to leave an abusive relationship safely, how to vanish without a trace. Felicia had spent the next 3 days in a blur. She told Darnell she was going on a business trip, packed her things, and vanished. No forwarding address, no social media, no phone number that he could trace. She wiped away everything that connected her to her old life. It wasn't enough. The fear still hung in the air, thick and suffocating. But it had to be done. She had done it. Her escape was supposed to feel like freedom. It was supposed to be her fresh start, her chance to breathe again. But stepping into this shiny, modern building, surrounded by luxury and money, made her feel smaller than ever. She had come from nothing, no family, no safety net, just her will to survive. Now, she was living in a building that felt like a million miles away from the life she had known, dressed in simple clothes that felt out of place against the polished marble floors and glass walls of the hall. Her new apartment was a far cry from the shabby places she had rented in the past. She had hoped for a sanctuary, a place where she could breathe, where she could feel safe. But there was no escaping the weight of her own fear. Every creak of the building, every unfamiliar sound, sent a jolt of panic through her. Felicia walked through the hall, her eyes scanning her surroundings. The building was pristine, modern, luxurious, the kind of place she had only ever seen in movies. But it felt too perfect, too unreal. She adjusted the box in her arms, her fingers tight with the weight of the past she was still trying to shake off. She felt like an imposter here. Then she saw him again. Kongman. He was standing outside his apartment, just a few steps away from hers, his posture relaxed, but commanding. His presence filled the hallway like he owned the space. His dark, unreadable eyes met hers, and for a moment, everything around her faded into the background. It was like he could see right through her, like he knew exactly what was happening inside her mind. He didn't smile, didn't say much. Just a simple new neighbor? His voice was calm, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of something else in his tone. Something she couldn't quite place. Felicia's heart skipped a beat. "Just moved in," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. But even as the words left her mouth, she felt like she was lying. Kongman didn't break eye contact, his gaze lingering on her for what felt like too long. He didn't smile, didn't move. He just watched her. It was unnerving, like he was studying her, taking mental notes. "Welcome to the building," he said finally, his words floating in the air between them, thick with something unsaid. He turned, not waiting for her response, and disappeared behind the door of apartment 34A. Felicia stood frozen in the hallway for a long moment, her hand still gripping the moving box. Something about Kongman made her skin crawl. He wasn't just any neighbor. He wasn't just some rich guy living in the same building. There was something about him, his presence, his gaze. That felt dangerous. Like he was watching her, waiting for something. It wasn't just fear. It was something else. Something deeper. Felicia couldn't shake the feeling that her new life wasn't the escape she had hoped for. What if Kongman wasn't just a neighbor? What if he knew more than he was letting on? As she closed the door to her new apartment, she felt the weight of her decisions, the fear of being found, and the strange, unsettling feeling that Kangman's presence wasn't an accident. Was she just another part of his carefully constructed world? Or was he a threat, one she wasn't prepared to face? Don't look away now. The answers are coming. And trust me, you don't want to miss this. Hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, and stay tuned, because things are about to get much more complicated. Felicia couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about Kongman. She had tried to ignore it, told herself it was just paranoia, but every time they crossed paths in the hallway, or every time he offered a polite but cryptic comment, that nagging sensation grew louder. It wasn't his wealth. That didn't bother her. She had seen enough rich people to know that some of them wore their money with grace, and some wore it like a mask. But with Kongman, it wasn't just the tailored suits or the luxury watch on his wrist, it was the air of control, the stillness he exuded. He didn't just walk into a room. He owned it. And whenever Felicia tried to strike up a casual conversation with him, she felt like she was speaking to a man who was always calculating his next move. Kongman, from what Felicia could see, was the kind of man whose name was known. Horizon Pacific Imports, the business he supposedly ran, was a legitimate empire. Importing goods all over the world, turning profits that would make even the most successful CEOs jealous. His name appeared in articles, his face in magazines. He was the definition of success. But that wasn't the whole story, was it? There were rumors, whispers, really, that followed him wherever he went. Felicia had learned not to trust everything she read, but she couldn't ignore the sense that something darker lingered behind his polished public persona. Whenever she searched for his name online, the business pages came up, but it didn't take long for the shadows to creep in. Articles from less reputable sources spoke of connections that didn't involve legal paperwork or board meetings. There were mentions of a Korean crime syndicate that spanned from Los Angeles to New York, rumors of hidden territories where Kongman wasn't just a businessman, but a kingpin. Felicia wasn't foolish. She knew how the world worked. Money and power came with consequences. And she could feel that same dangerous energy in Kongman. He wasn't just a man who could afford everything he wanted. He was a man who got what he wanted at any cost. The truth, Felicia suspected, was that Kangman's reach extended far beyond what anyone saw on the surface. She had noticed it the moment she met him, the way he looked at people. It wasn't just observation, it was more like control. He didn't just move through a room, he orchestrated it. His eyes missed nothing, every gesture, every word, every pause was noted, catalogued in a way that made Felicia feel like she was always under scrutiny. She didn't know how deep it went, but there was a story there, and it wasn't the one the magazines told. His influence stretched across industries and into shadows that she couldn't even begin to understand. He had connections, resources, people he controlled, and people who controlled him. A web so intricate that it would take years to untangle. And Felicia, despite her better judgment, couldn't stop herself from wanting to know more. Kangman's behavior toward her only added to her confusion. At first, she thought it was just politeness. After all, they were neighbors. But over time, she started noticing something else, an almost protective edge to his actions. It wasn't just the fact that he had helped her when she almost burned down her kitchen, or that he had given her the personal safety alarm. It was the way he had done it. Calm, collected, never asking for anything in return. And when he looked at her, there was a certain intensity in his gaze. It was as if he could see through her, as if he knew her every fear, her every hesitation. Sometimes it made her feel exposed, but other times, She felt an odd sense of relief, like someone finally had noticed. Kongman hadn't said much about her past, but she was sure he knew. She was sure he had looked into her history, just like he had looked into every person he'd ever crossed paths with. The thought made her uncomfortable. But the more she tried to push it away, the more she found herself thinking about him. Why did he care? What did he want from her? But despite everything, despite her unease, Felicia couldn't deny that she felt a strange pull toward Kongman. She had spent so long being afraid, constantly running, always hiding in the shadows. But with him, she couldn't tell if he was offering protection or control. She wanted to stay away. She wanted to keep her distance, remind herself that she was here to escape, not to get tangled in another web. But there was something about him. The way he moved through the world like he belonged to it, like the world belonged to him. She admired that strength, that confidence, but she also feared it. She wasn't sure she could trust a man who had that much power, and yet, when she looked into his eyes, she saw something else. Was it kindness? No. She wasn't naive. It was more complicated than that. But what if she was wrong? What if he was just a man trying to do good in a world that only rewarded bad behavior? That night, after another fleeting interaction with him in the hallway, she sat in her apartment, staring out at the city below, wondering if her gut was right. Was Kongman truly a man she could trust? Or was he another shadow she would have to outrun? Felicia stood up from the window and walked toward her door. She knew she had to make a decision, had to know the truth about Kongman. Was he her protector, or was he just another predator, wearing the mask of a savior? But as she opened the door to head to the elevator, she stopped dead in her tracks. There, just outside, was Kongman again, standing still, watching her, waiting. His eyes were different this time, darker, more intense, as though he could read every fear she had hidden deep inside her. Was this the moment she'd been running from? Or was it the moment she'd finally been waiting for? Don't look away now. You won't believe what happens next. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What do you think of Kongman? Can Felicia trust him? Felicia had always been a decent cook. But as she stood in her new kitchen, staring at the stove with its gleaming knobs and unfamiliar buttons, she felt completely out of her depth. It wasn't just that the kitchen was different, it was everything. Every corner of this apartment felt like it belonged to someone else, someone who knew what they were doing. It wasn't just the state-of-the-art appliances or the high-end counters, it was the pressure of pretending she fit in. She had to make dinner. She had to try at least. It was a small victory, a routine task she'd been good at once upon a time. But tonight, everything felt wrong. Her hands shook slightly as she tried to adjust the stove's heat, the unfamiliar controls proving more difficult than they seemed. Suddenly, she heard it, the screeching shrill of the smoke alarm. Felicia froze, her face flushing with embarrassment as she fumbled with the stove. Her heart raced. She couldn't even get this right. The smoke billowed from the pan, thick and fast, choking her with the acrid smell of burnt food. The alarm continued its relentless blare, making her panic rise even higher. She cursed under her breath, stumbling back toward the kitchen window to open it, but the smoke seemed to be everywhere now. Just as she was about to lose it, a knock at the door made her jump. She wiped her hands hastily on her jeans and dashed to the door, barely managing to stifle the urge to burst into tears. "It's me," came the voice from the other side. Felicia didn't need to ask who it was. She knew. It was Kongman. She opened the door, surprised by how calm he looked. As usual, he was impeccably dressed in dark slacks and a crisp button-down shirt, his black hair perfectly styled. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his eyes immediately scanning the chaos in her kitchen. "I'll take care of it," he said smoothly, stepping past her. He didn't ask if she needed help. He didn't even wait for her to answer. His presence was commanding, but somehow calming too. Kongman moved with purpose, his fingers deftly adjusting the stove to turn off the heat. With a few quick movements, he reached for the fire extinguisher under the sink and made short work of the situation, the smoke quickly dissipating as he cleared the air. Within moments, the crisis was over. The smoke alarm fell silent. Felicia stood there stunned. She hadn't realized how much she needed help until it was offered. She had been so wrapped up in her self-doubt, in feeling like an imposter in this world of luxury, that she didn't know what to do when things went wrong. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice tinged with a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. Her eyes shifted downward, avoiding his gaze, as the heat of the moment slowly faded. "No need to thank me," Kongman said, his tone still calm but now carrying a hint of something softer. "You're not used to this place yet. Don't stress over it." Felicia felt the knot in her chest loosen slightly, but the unease was still there. She turned to him, 1,000 questions bubbling in her mind, but she couldn't bring herself to ask them. What was he doing here? Why had he been watching her so closely? And why did he make her feel like she was falling apart in front of him? The next few days passed in a haze, a blur of packing, unpacking, and trying to make herself feel at home in a space that still felt foreign. The kitchen incident played over in her mind, again and again. She couldn't stop thinking about how easily Kongman had handled the situation, how at ease he was in a crisis. And she hated it. She wasn't used to relying on anyone, especially not on him. Kongman was the type of man who didn't need help. He took control of everything effortlessly. He was a successful businessman, yes, but there was something else about him. Something darker. He wasn't just a neighbor. He wasn't just someone she could pass in the hallway and wave at. The more Felicia thought about it, the more uncertain she became. There was something unnerving about him, something she couldn't quite put into words. He had come to her rescue so calmly, so smoothly, as if he were waiting for the moment to do it. Had he been watching her? Was he always nearby, just waiting for an excuse to step in? But then again, why would he do that? Felicia didn't understand Kongman. But the more she tried to push him away, the more she felt drawn to him. She had told herself, after everything with Darnell, that she'd never let anyone have that kind of control over her again. Yet, with Kongman, there was something that felt different. His help wasn't demanding. It wasn't manipulative. It was natural. But still, she couldn't help wondering what his intentions were. Was it all part of some game? Was he being kind, or was he simply laying the groundwork for something more? She couldn't deny that she felt safe in his presence, in a way she hadn't felt in years. But there was also a nagging voice inside her telling her that safety wasn't enough. Not with someone like him. Felicia's mind raced as she sat on the couch later that evening, staring out at the city below. The lights of the skyscrapers flickered in the distance, as if the world outside was moving on, while she remained stuck in place. Her hands shook as she held her phone. She wanted to reach out to someone, anyone, but she couldn't. No one would understand the complexity of the situation. She didn't know if she could trust Kongman. She didn't know if she should trust him. But with each passing day, the feeling of security he gave her grew stronger. And that scared her more than anything else. What was she supposed to do now? Felicia turned off her phone and set it down, her heart racing. She couldn't stay in this limbo forever. She had to know the truth about Kongman. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the truth might not be what she expected. Was he the protector she needed, or the predator she feared? The doorbell rang, snapping her from her thoughts. She wasn't sure whether to open the door or hide from what was coming. "Stay with me. You won't believe what happens next." The truth about Kongman is closer than Felicia realizes, and she's about to find out exactly what he's capable of. Subscribe now to find out the shocking truth behind his calm facade. The first email arrived in the middle of the night. Felicia had barely managed to fall asleep, exhausted from the constant tension of her new life. The hum of the city outside her window had started to lull her to sleep, but then her phone buzzed on the nightstand, sharp and intrusive. She grabbed it instinctively, her heart already racing before she even saw the name on the screen. It was from Darnell. The subject line read, "I know where you are." Felicia's hands trembled as she opened the message, her pulse quickening. It wasn't the first message she'd received from him since she'd left, but it felt different this time. The words were cold, chilling in their simplicity. "I've found you. You can run, but I'll always find you. I know where you are, Felicia. Don't make me come for you again. Her breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was what she had been terrified of all along. The reason she had planned every detail of her escape down to the last cent. She had hoped, desperately, that he wouldn't find her here. That this would be her fresh start, her safe space. But the message confirmed everything she had feared. Darnell was still hunting her. Her vision blurred as the walls of the apartment seemed to close in on her. The fear, that all-too-familiar sensation, gripped her chest. She had been running for months, yet Darnell was always a step behind. And now, here he was, pulling her back into his web of control. Felicia dropped the phone in her lap, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She stared at the ceiling, trying to steady her breath, but the dark thoughts spiraled faster than she could catch them. What was she supposed to do now? She got out of bed and moved to the window, looking out at the city lights below. The glow of the streetlights felt far away, almost like a different world. One where she wasn't being hunted, where she didn't have to look over her shoulder every time she stepped out the door. But that was a dream. And now it was slipping further away with every minute. Her mind raced. How could she live like this? How could she exist in a space that was supposed to be her safe haven if she was constantly being followed? The weight of it, the burden of the past chasing her, was too much to bear. Every sound, every footstep in the hall, felt like a reminder that she wasn't free. She hadn't been free in so long. The fear quickly turned to paranoia. Every sound felt amplified, every creak of the building setting her nerves on edge. She couldn't relax. Even the quiet moments in her apartment, when she would try to breathe deeply and calm herself, felt suffocating. Her mind replayed the message over and over again, each word embedding itself in her thoughts like a constant reminder that Darnell was still out there, waiting for his chance. She couldn't even walk down the hall without feeling eyes on her. The feeling of being watched, of being tracked, consumed her. Even the slightest noise, footsteps in the hallway, the hum of the elevator, made her jump. She couldn't trust anyone, couldn't even trust herself to make it through the day without imagining the worst. She had moved so far from Darnell, yet his shadow followed her everywhere. And as much as she wanted to shake it off, to believe that this was all in her head, a small part of her feared that it wasn't. Every time she saw Kongman in the hallway, her skin prickled. Could he see through her? Did he know more than he let on? Was he part of her escape, or was he another force watching her, waiting for the right moment? Her paranoia gnawed at her every minute. She tried to distract herself with small tasks, unpacking the last of her things, organizing her apartment, but the nagging feeling in her gut wouldn't go away. The walls of her new life were closing in on her, and she couldn't breathe. It was only a matter of time before Kongman figured it out. He wasn't just a businessman. He wasn't just a man who liked to keep to himself in the shadows of the building. Kongman was much more than that. One afternoon, Felicia noticed Kongman standing by his door, his phone in his hand. He didn't look like he was working, he looked like he was waiting for something or someone. He caught her looking and gave her a brief, unreadable smile before he disappeared into his apartment. But there was something about the way he looked at her that made her uneasy. It wasn't until the next day that she realized he was watching her more closely than she'd ever realized. The brief exchanges, the moments of silence between them, he was studying her. It wasn't just curiosity. It was methodical, intentional. The next evening, when she stepped outside to check the mail, Felicia noticed something strange. Kongman was outside, talking to a man in a dark suit. She didn't recognize him. But the conversation seemed too serious for a casual chat between neighbors. Felicia couldn't make out the words, but she could feel the tension in the air. When Kongman saw her, he smiled, just as he always did, but his eyes lingered for a moment too long. It wasn't a friendly look. It was something else, something that made her skin crawl. She couldn't ignore it any longer. Kongman was involved in something deeper than she could understand. He wasn't just a neighbor. Felicia felt a chill run down her spine. What did he want with her? Was he investigating her? Or was he trying to protect her in some strange, calculated way? Despite the unease, Felicia felt something shifting inside her. Every time she saw Kong Man, every time he helped her or spoke to her, there was a part of her that wanted to believe him. There was a strange sense of comfort in his presence, like he was a rock, something solid in her chaotic world. But the deeper she fell into that sense of security, the more terrified she became. Could she trust him? Could she trust anyone? Her mind told her to keep her distance, to be wary. But her heart was telling her something different. Was this the beginning of something real? Felicia didn't know if she was ready to trust again, but Kong Man had a way of making her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could. But the questions remained. Was he genuinely trying to protect her? Or was there something more to his interest in her, something darker than she had ever imagined? Felicia couldn't decide. She couldn't figure out whether she was falling into his trap or into his arms. The danger in trusting him was clear, but so was the possibility that he might be the only one who could help her survive. Her mind raced with the decision. Trust him? Or run? The doorbell rang again. Felicia's heart skipped a beat. Who was it this time? Another threat from her past? Or had Kong Man finally come to reveal his true intentions? Stay tuned. You won't believe what happens next. Hit the subscribe button now and join Felicia as she faces a decision that will change everything. Can she trust Kong Man? Or is he just another shadow she's been running from? It came in the middle of the night, the knock that made her heart stop. She had been lying in bed, the city lights flickering through the window, trying to quiet her racing thoughts. The last few days had been filled with too many close calls, too many moments of fear. Every creak in the hall, every shadow outside her window, had her on edge. When she opened the door, she wasn't prepared for what she saw. A bouquet of black roses. They weren't from any florist she recognized. The note attached was simple, blunt, and haunting. You can't escape me. I'll always find you. Felicia's hands shook as she read the words again, her heart sinking with the weight of them. She had hoped, for just a moment, that maybe, just maybe, Darnell had lost interest. That maybe the worst was over. But this was a chilling reminder that she was still trapped in his world, even hundreds of miles away. Her mind raced. Black roses. A symbol of death, of obsession. She remembered the last time she had seen them, when Darnell had sent them to her after their first fight, as if they were a gift. But this time, it wasn't a fight, it was a warning. He was still watching her, still stalking her from afar. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she fought them back. She wasn't going to break. Not this time. But as she stood there, staring at the flowers, she felt something else, fear. She could feel it crawling up her spine, making every hair on her neck stand on end. This wasn't just about Darnell. This was about the man he had turned her into, the woman who couldn't escape, the woman who couldn't protect herself. That's when she heard a knock at the door again. This time, she wasn't surprised. It was Kong Man. Everything okay? His voice was calm as always, yet there was a sharpness to it, a sense of urgency that wasn't there before. Felicia turned around, holding the black roses behind her back, not wanting him to see the reminder of her past. But Kong Man wasn't looking at the flowers. His eyes scanned her face, noticing the tension, the unease. Without a word, he stepped inside, his presence commanding but not intrusive. He moved past her as if he had done this 100 times before. "You're not safe here, Felicia," he said, his voice low. "Not with him still out there." She froze. "What do you mean?" Kong Man didn't answer at first. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, handing it to her. "Take this," he said. "It's a personal safety alarm. Press the button if you feel threatened. I'll be there before anyone can even think of getting to you." Felicia stared at the small device in her hand, her fingers running over the sleek metal. It was practical, unobtrusive, a tool of protection. But the gesture felt different from anything she had ever expected from a neighbor. There was no casual politeness. No questioning why she needed it. Just a simple, unspoken understanding that she was in danger. "I've already taken steps to make sure you're protected," Kong Man continued. His words were matter-of-fact, but his tone was different. There was something more in it now, something personal. "You don't need to worry about him anymore." Felicia wanted to push back, to question him, to ask why he was doing this for her. But the fear that had been gnawing at her all night, the panic she had been holding inside, made her want to believe him. For the first time since she had come to this building, she felt like maybe, just maybe, someone understood. She didn't want to depend on him. She didn't want to rely on anyone, not after everything she had been through. But the safety he offered felt real. And in that moment, she realized just how badly she needed it. The next morning, Felicia woke up to another email. This one, however, was different. It looked official, too official. A message from the police, or at least it seemed that way. The sender's name was legitimate enough, the formatting all seemed professional, and the message itself was alarming. This is an urgent notification regarding your safety. We have received information that a threat has been made against you. Please leave the building immediately. Officers will meet you outside. Felicia's heart stopped. A fake police message. She knew that instinctively. It had Darnell written all over it, another attempt to lure her into the open. But how had he gotten her email? How had he known where to find her? Her hand shook as she reached for the safety device Kong Man had given her, pressing the button in desperation. The alarm went off, a loud, high-pitched sound that cut through the apartment. Moments later, Kong Man was at her door. He didn't knock. He didn't need to. He was already there, his face dark, his expression set. They're trying to draw you out, he said, his voice steady but filled with an edge. But you're not going anywhere. Not without me. Felicia's mind was spinning. How did he know? I've already called the building security. I'll make sure nothing happens to you. But Felicia wasn't listening anymore. Her mind was too full of the noise, the fear, the panic. She had been running for so long so far. And now it was all coming back to her. Kingman's hand on her shoulder snapped her back to reality. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with confusion and anxiety. I'll keep you safe, he repeated. His eyes softened just for a second, and for the first time, Felicia believed him. Days passed, and Felicia found herself relying on Kongman more and more. His presence became a constant comfort, even as she fought against the feelings stirring inside her. Every time she saw him, she felt a wave of security, but also a wave of guilt. She didn't want to need anyone. She had been independent for so long she had to be. But the more she was around Kongman, the more she realized how much he had done for her, how far he had gone to keep her safe. And even though the thought of depending on him terrified her, it felt impossible to ignore the growing connection. He was there when she needed him. He wasn't just a neighbor anymore. He was someone who had stepped into the chaos of her life and tried to make it better. Felicia wasn't sure if she could trust him completely. But she was learning to trust the way he made her feel, protected. It was a feeling she hadn't had in so long. But as she sat in her apartment one night, looking at the safety device in her hand, she realized something. She had been running from Darnell, from her past, for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to trust anyone. Now, she was standing at a crossroads, unsure of whether to follow Kingman's protection or to pull away and keep running. Her fear of Darnell was growing, and so was her need for Kongman. But could she really trust him? Felicia stood at the window, staring out at the city below, her heart torn between her past and her future. Kongman had been there for her, but what if this was all part of his game? What if he was just like Darnell, just another person pretending to care? Her phone buzzed again, but this time, she didn't recognize the number. Could it be Darnell? Or was it something far worse? Stay tuned. The truth is about to unfold, and you won't want to miss it. Hit the subscribe button and let me know what you think. Does Felicia trust Kongman, or is the danger closer than she realizes? Felicia had never felt more vulnerable. Her past was always one step behind her, and despite the protection Kongman had offered, she knew that the inevitable confrontation with Darnell was coming. There was no avoiding it. No running. Kongman had been planning for weeks. He had ensured that every detail was accounted for, making sure that when Darnell finally made his move, they'd be ready. Together, they had staged the perfect opportunity to draw Darnell out. Kingman's people had positioned themselves strategically, prepared for anything. Felicia had been warned to stay low, to stay hidden, but she knew, deep down, that the moment was approaching. It was that evening when it happened. Felicia was at home, doing her best to ignore the dread creeping up her spine. It was too quiet. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, something was about to break. And then, just as she had predicted, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Her pulse quickened as Kangman's team mobilized, making their move. They were ready. Felicia held her breath, her heart hammering in her chest. She wasn't sure what would happen, but she could feel Kangman's presence behind her, steady and unshakable. Then, suddenly, the door slammed open. Darnell was there, his face twisted with rage, his eyes wild with that same cold obsession. But this time, it wasn't just him. He wasn't alone. His backup, a few men dressed in black, followed him in, the air thick with tension. Kangman moved faster than Felicia could react, his men surrounding Darnell's crew with calculated precision. They were neutralized in seconds, taken down without a single shot fired. It was almost surgical, efficient, controlled. Felicia had never seen anything like it. But it was Kangman who made the real move. Without a word, he stepped toward Darnell, his eyes never leaving his face. Felicia watched as Darnell's confident sneer faltered under Kangman's gaze. "You thought you could come after her again?" Kangman's voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. It wasn't the same man who had once offered her protection. This was the Kangman she had been terrified of from the start. Darnell's eyes darted around, sizing up the situation. He realized too late that he had underestimated the man standing before him. His smug attitude faltered, but he wasn't going down without a fight. "I'm not afraid of you," Darnell spat, his voice shaky but defiant. Kangman didn't flinch. "You should be," he replied. With a swift motion, Kangman grabbed Darnell by the collar and slammed him against the wall, his grip tight and unforgiving. Felicia flinched at the sight. She had never seen this side of Kangman before. This wasn't just a man who protected her. This was a man who would take down anyone who dared to cross him. Darnell struggled, but Kangman was too strong. "This ends now," Kangman whispered. "You won't touch her again." With one final shove, Kangman released Darnell, who collapsed to the ground, defeated. His men were already taken care of, incapacitated and tied up, awaiting their fate. Kangman turned toward Felicia, his face unreadable. "It's over." Felicia stood there, her chest tight, her mind in a whirl. She had watched the man who had tormented her for so long fall to his knees, and yet she didn't feel relief. She felt free. It wasn't the victory she had imagined. No, it was different. The fear she had lived with for so long was gone, replaced by something else. Strength. The strength to move forward. She didn't realize it then, but she was changing. With each passing day, Felicia became someone new. Someone stronger, someone more in control of her own destiny. In the weeks that followed, Felicia began rebuilding her life. She started her nonprofit for abuse survivors, using her own story as a way to connect with others. She poured herself into her work, driven by a need to make a difference. Each success, no matter how small, made her feel more empowered, more in charge of her future. And through it all, Kangman was there. Not in the way Darnell had been, controlling and suffocating, but in a way that made Felicia feel safe, like someone who understood her, who saw her. But even with all her progress, a part of her still wondered, where did Kangman fit into this new life? It wasn't just Felicia who had changed. Kangman, too, was evolving. The ruthless man she had first met was still there, buried beneath the surface. But over time, he began distancing himself from his past. The business he had built, the world he had known, was starting to crumble at the edges. Felicia had opened his eyes to a different life, a life that didn't involve darkness, crime, or shadows. For the first time, Kangman began to question his choices. The power he once relished now felt hollow. He wanted more. Not just for himself, but for Felicia. He found himself thinking about a future with her, a life where he didn't have to hide in the shadows. A life where they could both be free. One evening, as Felicia sat at her desk, reviewing plans for her nonprofit, she felt Kangman's presence in the room. She looked up, meeting his gaze. For a moment, everything else faded away. It was just the two of them. Kangman took a deep breath, his expression soft but serious. "Felicia," he began, his voice low, "I know we've been through a lot, and I know we're both still healing. But I want you to know that I'm ready to be the man you need. To build a future with you." Felicia's heart raced, her mind reeling from his words. She had never allowed herself to imagine a future with anyone. But Kangman was different. His eyes never left hers as he spoke. "Will you marry me?" Her breath caught in her throat. The man who had once been her protector, her savior, was now asking for something even deeper. Something permanent. Felicia's world felt like it was spinning, but in the best possible way. She realized in that moment that she wasn't just running anymore. She wasn't running from her past, from fear. She was walking into a new future, with Kangman by her side. Felicia stood there, frozen in the moment, the weight of Kangman's proposal sinking in. Could she truly start a new life with him, leave everything behind, and walk into the unknown? Could she trust him with her future? The question lingered in the air, but the answer was closer than she thought. "Stay with me." The choice Felicia has to make is about more than just love. It's about survival, trust, and the strength to face the future. Hit the subscribe button and comment below. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Could you trust someone who had once been your savior, but had a past as dark as Kangman's?